Rain hammered against the precinct windows like 1,000 desperate fingers seeking shelter. I stood there, soaked to the bone, watching Officer Ryan Mitchell turn the lock on his office door with a soft, deliberate click that seemed to echo through my entire body. "Wait," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the storm outside. "Why are you?" He turned to face me, those storm-gray eyes holding something I couldn't quite name, something that made my breath catch and my heart forget its rhythm. "Because," he said quietly, "what you're about to tell me, I have a feeling it's going to change everything." He was right, but not in the way either of us expected. The neon sign outside Chen's corner store flickered erratically, casting alternating shadows of red and blue across the rain-slicked pavement. I pulled my jacket tighter around my shoulders, but it did little to stop the autumn chill from seeping into my bones. October in Seattle had a way of making you feel small, vulnerable, exposed. My name is Adrian Torres, and 24 hours ago my life was perfectly ordinary. I worked as a graphic designer for a small marketing firm downtown, lived in a modest studio apartment in Capitol Hill, and spent my evenings either sketching in coffee shops or video calling my sister Maya in Portland. I was out, comfortable with who I was, but not exactly living some grand romantic adventure. I'd accepted that love, the kind that makes your soul ache and your heart race, might not be in the cards for me. Not after Daniel. Not after I'd spent 3 years building a life with someone who ultimately decided that loving me openly was too complicated, too inconvenient for his carefully constructed straight-passing life. But standing in that convenience store at 11:47 p.m., watching a hooded figure shove Mr. Chen against the counter and demand money from the register, I wasn't thinking about love or heartbreak or any of that. I was thinking about survival. I ducked behind the refrigerated section, my phone trembling in my hands as I tried to dial 911 without making a sound. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain the robber would hear it, would turn and see me crouched there like a frightened animal. The call connected, a calm, professional voice on the other end. "911, what's your emergency?" "There's a robbery," I whispered, my lips barely moving. "Chen's corner store on Pike Street. There's a man with a—" I stopped, squinting through the glass doors of the refrigerator case. "I think he has a weapon, please hurry." "Officers are on their way, stay hidden and stay on the line." But I didn't stay on the line. Because in that moment, Mr. Chen, 72 years old, with kind eyes and a habit of giving free candy to neighborhood kids, reached for something under the counter. And the robber panicked. What happened next occurred in fragments like a film reel with missing frames. A shout, a struggle, the sound of glass shattering, Mr. Chen stumbling backward, clutching his arm, blood, so much blood. And then sirens, growing louder, closer, until red and blue lights flooded the store and the robber bolted out the back exit. I emerged from my hiding spot on shaking legs, rushing to Mr. Chen's side as two police officers burst through the front door. One immediately called for an ambulance while the other, a tall, broad-shouldered man with dark hair and eyes the color of a winter storm, knelt beside me. "Sir, are you injured?" His voice was deep, steady, the kind of voice that could calm a hurricane. I shook my head, unable to speak, my hands pressed against Mr. Chen's wound, trying to stop the bleeding like I'd seen in movies. I had no idea if I was doing it right. "You're doing good," the officer said, and his hand briefly touched my shoulder, a gesture so simple yet so grounding that I felt tethered to reality again. "The ambulance is 30 seconds out. What's your name?" "Adrian," I managed. "Adrian Torres." "I'm Officer Mitchell, Ryan Mitchell. Can you tell me what happened?" I told him everything I could remember, my words tumbling out in a rushed, disjointed stream. He listened intently, his focus never wavering from my face, occasionally jotting notes in a small pad. When the paramedics arrived and took over Mr. Chen's care, Ryan helped me to my feet. "You did the right thing," he said. "Calling us, staying hidden, helping him, you might have saved his life tonight." I wanted to feel proud of that. Instead, I just felt hollow, shaken, like I'd been turned inside out and didn't know how to reassemble myself. "I'll need you to come to the station to give a formal statement," Ryan continued. "Is that okay? I can drive you myself. You look like you shouldn't be alone right now." There was something in the way he said it, not pitying, not condescending, just genuinely concerned, that made me nod. "Okay," I whispered. The precinct was quieter than I'd expected. I suppose I'd imagine something out of a crime drama, phones ringing constantly, suspects in handcuffs being hauled past, detectives shouting about leads. Instead, it was almost subdued. A few officers worked at desks typing reports. A coffee maker gurgled in the corner. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Ryan guided me through the maze of desks with a gentle hand on my upper back, not pushing, just directing. I was acutely aware of his presence, of how he seemed to radiate a kind of calm competence that made me feel safer than I had in hours. "Conference room 2, he said, nodding to a door at the end of a hallway. "It's more comfortable than the interview rooms, less interrogation-like." I managed a weak smile. "Is that where you take all your witnesses?" "Only the ones who look like they've been through hell." He paused, his expression softening. "Can I get you something? Coffee, water? I think there might be some terrible vending machine hot chocolate somewhere." "Water would be good." He disappeared for a moment, returning with a bottle of water and a blanket. "You're shivering." I hadn't noticed. He draped the blanket over my shoulders and I pulled it tight, grateful for the warmth. The conference room was exactly as advertised, more comfortable than I'd expected. A long table, cushioned chairs, a whiteboard on one wall covered in half-erased notes about some other case. Ryan sat across from me, his posture open and relaxed despite the late hour. "Before we start," he said, "I want you to know that you're not in any trouble. You're the victim here, well, witness to a victim. This is just so we have everything documented properly for the case." I nodded, taking a sip of water. My hands were steadier now. He asked questions methodically, walking me through the timeline again, asking about details I hadn't thought to mention before. What had I been buying at the store? Had I noticed anyone following me? Could I describe the robber's voice, his height, any distinguishing features? I answered as best I could, but my mind kept drifting to Ryan himself. The way his brow furrowed when he concentrated. The small scar above his left eyebrow. The fact that he'd removed his uniform jacket and rolled up his shirt sleeves, revealing forearms that suggested he spent his off hours doing something more physical than paperwork. "Adrian." I blinked. "Sorry, what?" "I asked if you felt up to looking at some photos. We think we might know who did this, and if you can identify him, it would help us immensely." "Of course, yes." He pulled out a tablet, swiping through a series of mugshots. My stomach churned with each image, but none of them felt right, and then, "That one," I pointed. "I think, I'm not completely certain, but the eyes." I remember thinking his eyes looked almost panicked, even behind the hood. Ryan studied the photo. "Marcus Webb, known for small-time theft, escalated recently. This is good, Adrian, really good." He made a few notes, then set the tablet aside and leaned back in his chair. For the first time since we'd arrived, he looked tired. There were shadows under his eyes, and I wondered how long his shift had been. "Is this what you always wanted to do?" I asked suddenly, surprising myself. "Be a police officer?" He seemed surprised too, but not in a bad way. A small smile tugged at his lips. "That's a pretty personal question for a witness statement." "Sorry, I fumbled for words. "You seem good at it, the whole calm in crisis thing." "Thanks," he considered for a moment. "And yeah, I guess it was. My dad was a cop, my uncle. It felt like the family business, but I wanted to help people. I know that sounds naive." "It doesn't," I said softly. "It sounds honest." Our eyes met across the table and something shifted in the air between us. It was subtle, barely perceptible, but I felt it in my chest, a kind of recognition, like seeing someone familiar in a crowd of strangers. Ryan cleared his throat, looking away first. "What about you? What do you do when you're not witnessing robberies?" "Graphic designer, mostly corporate branding stuff. It's not exactly saving lives, but I like making things beautiful, or at least visually coherent." "I bet you're good at it." "What makes you say that?" He gestured vaguely at me. "You have an artist's way of describing things, very observant. The way you detailed everything tonight, most people are too shaken to remember that much." I was terrified, I admitted. "I'm still terrified. I keep thinking about what could have happened if he'd seen me, if I'd made a noise." "But you didn't. You stayed smart, stayed safe, and helped someone who needed it." Ryan's voice was firm, grounding. "Give yourself credit for that." I wanted to believe him, wanted to feel brave instead of like I just stumbled through something horrible by sheer luck. Okay, I said quietly, I'll try. He smiled then, a real smile that reached his eyes and transformed his entire face from stern professional to something warmer, more human. And that's when I noticed the small pride flag pin on his badge holder. Subtle, barely visible unless you were looking, but unmistakably there. My heart did something complicated in my chest. We talked for another hour, though at some point it stopped being about the robbery and became something else entirely. He told me about growing up in Seattle, about his younger brother who was studying environmental science at UW, about the coffee shop near the precinct that made the only decent espresso in the neighborhood. I told him about Maya, about leaving behind a small conservative town in California to build a life where I could be myself, about my disastrous attempt at learning pottery last year that had resulted in several lopsided bowls I still used out of sheer stubbornness. It felt natural, easy, like we'd known each other longer than a few hours. Like we were just two people talking late at night, not a police officer and a witness separated by procedure and protocol. It's almost 1 a.m., Ryan said eventually, glancing at his watch. I should let you go home, unless, do you want someone to escort you? After tonight, I'd understand if you didn't want to walk alone. I'll be okay, I said, though I wasn't entirely sure that was true. I'm just a few blocks away. He frowned slightly. Let me at least call you a ride. Ryan, Officer Mitchell. Ryan is fine, he stood, and I realized how tall he actually was. 6'2", maybe 6'3", come on, I'll walk you out. The precinct was even quieter now, most of the day shift long gone and the skeleton night crew absorbed in their own tasks. Ryan grabbed his jacket from his desk and we walked toward the exit. But as we approached the main doors, he hesitated. There's actually something else I need to ask you, he said, and I wanted to wait until we were done with the official statement. My pulse quickened. Okay. Come with me for a second. He led me back down the hallway, but instead of the conference room, he opened the door to a smaller office. His office, I realized, seeing his name on a small placard. Inside was tidy but lived in, a desk covered in organized files, a coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Brother," a framed photo of what looked like his family. And then he closed the door. And locked it. I froze, every nerve ending suddenly alert. Wait, I whispered, why are you? He turned to face me and the expression on his face was unlike anything I'd seen from him all night. Vulnerable, conflicted, almost afraid. Because, he said quietly, what you're about to tell me, I have a feeling it's going to change everything. I don't understand. He ran a hand through his dark hair and I could see him wrestling with something internal. The man who robbed the store tonight, Marcus Webb, do you know why I recognized him immediately? I shook my head. Because 3 months ago I arrested him for breaking into an apartment in Capitol Hill. Your apartment building, Adrian. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. What? He never got inside your specific unit, but he tried several on your floor. We caught him before he managed to break in anywhere, but... Ryan's jaw tightened. When I ran your address tonight, I remembered, and there's more. He pulled out his phone, swiping to a series of photos. Security camera footage, time-stamped from various dates over the past month. I think he's been watching you, Ryan said grimly. Following you, the robbery tonight might not have been random, I think he was waiting for you. My blood turned to ice. Why would he? I don't know, but I can't ignore the pattern. He stepped closer and I could see genuine worry in his eyes. Adrian, I locked the door because I'm about to break about 15 departmental protocols and I need to know you understand how serious this is. I'm listening. I want to protect you, he said simply. Officially, I can suggest increased patrols in your area, tell you to be vigilant, file for a restraining order once we catch him, but unofficially, he hesitated. I don't think that's enough, and I can't let you leave here tonight knowing you might be in danger without doing everything I can to keep you safe. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to make sure someone is watching out for you until we have Marcus Webb in custody, someone who actually gives a damn, and I'm saying, he took a breath, I'm saying that someone should probably be me. My heart hammered. You want to, what, be my bodyguard? I want you to not be alone if he's really targeting you. You can say no, you can walk out that door right now and we'll handle this through official channels. But Adrian, he stopped himself, seeming to reconsider his words. I need to know you're safe, even if that's completely inappropriate of me to say. I should have been scared, should have questioned his motives, his intensity, the way he'd locked the door like we were conspiring. Instead, I felt something else entirely, a spark of recognition, of possibility of two people orbiting each other and finally admitting the pull of gravity. It's inappropriate, I agreed softly, extremely inappropriate. I know. You could get in serious trouble. I know that too. And you're still standing here asking me this. Ryan's eyes held mine. Yeah, I am. The rain continued its relentless percussion against the window. Somewhere in the building, a phone rang and went unanswered. Time seemed suspended in that locked office, in the space between what was professional and what was dangerously, thrillingly personal. Okay, I heard myself say, okay. His shoulders dropped slightly, relief evident. Okay. But I have conditions, I added, finding my voice. I want to understand everything. The case, the threat, why you think he's targeting me. I'm not going to be kept in the dark like I'm something fragile that needs protecting without information. A hint of admiration crossed Ryan's face. Deal, I'll tell you everything I know. And second, I continued, my pulse racing, if we're going to do this, whatever this is, I need to know what I'm getting into, not just with the case, with you. He stepped closer, close enough that I could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes. What do you want to know? The pride pin on your badge, is that, are you? Out at work, yeah, it was terrifying at first, but turns out most people don't care as much as you think they will. His voice softened. And if you're asking if I'm attracted to you, the answer is yes. I have been since the moment you looked up at me from helping Mr. Chen, even though I knew I shouldn't be thinking about anything except doing my job. My breath caught. Ryan. But, he said firmly, that's not why I'm offering to do this. Your safety comes first, everything else is secondary, do you understand? I nodded, not trusting my voice. Good, he unlocked the door but didn't open it yet. Let me take you home, we'll figure out the rest tomorrow. As we left the precinct and stepped into the rain-soaked night, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life had just turned onto a completely unexpected path, one that was dangerous and complicated and potentially heartbreaking. But also, for the first time since Daniel, one that felt alive with possibility. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every sound in my apartment, the creak of settling wood, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant wail of sirens, felt loaded with threat. I kept the lights on, sitting on my couch with my laptop and a baseball bat I'd bought years ago and never actually used, watching the door like Marcus Webb might materialize through it at any moment. Ryan had walked me to my building, checked every room of my studio apartment with the thoroughness of someone trained to find threats, and made me promise to call him if anything felt off. I'm serious, he'd said. Standing in my doorway with rain still dripping from his jacket. I don't care if it's 3 a.m. and you just heard a weird noise, you call me. He'd written his personal number on the back of his card, his handwriting surprisingly neat for a cop who probably filled out reports all day. Thank you, I'd said, and meant it in ways that went deeper than just the protection he was offering. He'd hesitated, looking like he wanted to say something else but ultimately just nodded. Lock this behind me, Deadbolt 2. Now, watching dawn break over Seattle's skyline through my rain-streaked window, I finally allowed myself to process everything that had happened. In the span of 12 hours, I'd witnessed a violent crime, discovered I might be the target of a stalker, and developed feelings for a police officer who'd literally locked the door to confess he wanted to protect me. It felt surreal, like I'd stumbled into someone else's life. My phone buzzed at 6:47 a.m., a text from an unknown number that I immediately recognized as Ryan's. Ryan, you awake? Me, never went asleep. Ryan, same coffee. Me, that's probably a terrible idea. Ryan, agreed, meet me at Lighthouse Roasters in 30. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. The smart thing would be to keep this professional, maintain boundaries, not get involved with someone who had the power to complicate my life in 1,000 different ways. But I'd never been particularly good at smart when it came to my heart. Me, make it 45, I need to shower and pretend I'm a functional human. Ryan, take your time, I'll be the tired-looking guy in the corner. Chapter 5, Coffee and Confessions. Lighthouse Roasters was tucked into a side street in Fremont, the kind of place that took coffee seriously without being pretentious about it. Exposed brick walls, mismatched furniture, the rich smell of freshly ground beans. I spotted Ryan immediately, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups already in front of him. He looked exhausted but somehow more relaxed than he had in uniform. Jeans, a navy Henley that fit him in ways I tried not to think about, his dark hair slightly damp from a recent shower. He stood when he saw me approach. "Hey," he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. "You look better than expected for someone who didn't sleep." Liar, I slid into the chair across from him, but I appreciate the effort. He pushed one of the cups toward me. "I guessed on your order, Americano, splash of oat milk." I blinked. "How did you?" "You had an empty cup in your apartment last night." Ballard Coffee Roasters, their cups are distinctive and they're known for their oat milk options. He shrugged. "Told you I'm observant." "That's actually impressive and slightly concerning." "Part of the job," he said, but there was warmth in his voice that suggested he was pleased I'd noticed. "How are you holding up, really?" I wrapped my hands around the cup, letting the heat seep into my palms. "Honestly, I keep waiting to wake up. This doesn't feel real, any of it." "I know the feeling." Something in his tone made me look up. "What do you mean?" Ryan was quiet for a moment, staring into his coffee like it held answers. "Can I be honest with you, completely honest, even though I probably shouldn't be?" "Please." "When I pulled up to that convenience store last night and saw you there, helping Mr. Chen even though you were clearly terrified." He paused. "I had this moment where I thought this person is extraordinary, and then I spent the next 3 hours trying to convince myself I was just doing my job, just being professional, that what I was feeling was just adrenaline or misplaced protective instinct. My heart was doing that complicated thing again, and I'm really bad at lying to myself." He met my eyes. "Adrian, I'm attracted to you. I think you're brave and kind and honest in ways that make me want to know everything about you. But I'm also the officer assigned to your case, and there's a real threat to your safety that needs to be my primary focus. So I'm trying to figure out how to balance those things without screwing up either." The vulnerability in his admission took my breath away. "Can I be honest too?" "Yeah. I haven't felt this way about anyone in a long time," I said quietly. "And I'm terrified, not just of Marcus Webb or being stalked or any of that. I'm terrified of this," I gestured between us. "Of wanting something that could go wrong in so many ways, of letting myself feel anything after I swore I was done with complicated relationships." "What happened?" Ryan asked gently, "with the last person?" I hadn't planned to tell him about Daniel, hadn't planned to expose that wound so soon. But sitting there in the morning light with coffee warming my hands and this man looking at me like I mattered, the words tumbled out. I told him about 3 years of loving someone who loved me back but only in private. About canceled plans when Daniel's work colleagues might see us together. About holidays spent apart because he wasn't ready to come out to his family. About the slow erosion of my self-worth as I tried to be understanding, patient enough. He ended it via text, I finished, the old anger still sharp. Said he'd met someone, a woman, and that it was easier this way, that he was sorry but he needed to live a normal life, like what we had was somehow defective. Ryan's jaw tightened. "He sounds like an asshole." "He was scared," I said, though I'd long since stopped making excuses for Daniel. "And I was stupid for staying as long as I did." "You weren't stupid, you were hopeful. There's a difference." Ryan reached across the table, his hand hovering near mine but not quite touching. "And for what it's worth, anyone who made you feel like you were too much or not enough is someone who never deserved you in the first place." Tears pricked at my eyes unexpectedly. "You don't even know me." "I'm starting to." His hand closed the remaining distance, his fingers brushing against mine. "And what I know so far, I really like." We sat like that for a moment, hands barely touching across the table while the coffee shop hummed with morning activity around us. It felt fragile and significant, like we were building something delicate that could shatter if we moved too quickly. "So what do we do?" I asked finally, "about all of this?" Ryan pulled back slightly, shifting into a more professional posture. "First, we keep you safe. I talked to my sergeant this morning, didn't mention anything personal," he added quickly. "But I convinced him to authorize extra surveillance on your building and to fast-track the warrant for Marcus Webb's arrest. We've got officers checking his known associates, places he might be hiding. And second, we figure out what this is between us once the case is resolved and there's no ethical conflict." He paused. If you want to figure it out, no pressure. I know this is intense and probably overwhelming. It is, I admitted, but I don't want to wait for permission to feel what I'm feeling. Life's too short and too uncertain. What are you saying? I took a breath, feeling brave despite my exhaustion. I'm saying let's be careful but not closed off. Let's focus on the case but not pretend there's nothing else happening here. And when this is over, when Marcus Webb is caught and I'm not someone you need to protect anymore, let's see where this goes. A slow smile spread across Ryan's face, transforming it entirely. I can work with that. Chapter 6: PATTRNS in the Dark. Over the next week, my life fell into a strange new rhythm. Ryan arranged for patrol cars to circle my block regularly, installed additional security measures on my apartment door, and somehow managed to check in with me multiple times a day without it feeling suffocating. We met for coffee each morning, ostensibly so he could update me on the case. But our conversations always wandered beyond just the investigation, into books, music, childhood memories, dreams we'd had and abandoned and sometimes found again. I learned that Ryan had wanted to be an architect before following his family into law enforcement, that he volunteered at a youth center in Beacon Hill, mentoring teens who needed adult role models, that he'd been out since college but had still struggled with his family's initial reaction, especially his father's complicated mix of acceptance and discomfort. He loves me, Ryan explained one morning, but I don't think he knows how to reconcile the son he raised with the reality of who I am, so we exist in this weird space where we talk about everything except anything real. That sounds lonely, I said. It is sometimes, he shrugged, but I've built a family of choice too, people who get it, that helps. I told him about Maya, about how she'd been my fiercest defender when I came out at 16. About our parents who'd eventually come around but whose love still sometimes felt conditional, weighted with unspoken expectations. About finding community in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood, in queer book clubs and pride parades and quiet moments of recognition with strangers who understood. You talk about belonging like it's something you're still searching for, Ryan observed. Maybe I am, I admitted, or maybe I'm just scared that when I find it, it won't last. He'd looked at me with such understanding that it physically hurt. I get that. But beneath these tentative, growing connections, the threat remained real. Ryan had shown me the surveillance footage, Marcus Webb on my street across from my building, following me to the grocery store. Always at a distance, always careful but unmistakably there. Why me? I'd asked, staring at the grainy images. What does he want? We're working on that, Ryan said. But Adrian, I need you to promise me you'll be vigilant, vary your routes, don't go anywhere alone if you can help it, and if you see him. I call you immediately, I know. The fear was constant now, a low-level hum of anxiety that colored everything. I jumped at shadows, startled at sudden noises, felt watched even when I was alone. Sleep came in fitful bursts, haunted by dreams of locked doors and figures in hooded sweatshirts. But Ryan was there, steady, present, a grounding force that kept me from spiraling completely. One night, after a particularly bad anxiety attack where I'd called him at midnight convinced I'd heard someone at my door, he'd arrived within 15 minutes, checked the entire building, and then sat with me on my couch until dawn. You don't have to stay, I'd whispered, ashamed of my fear. I want to, he'd replied simply. Besides, where else would I be? Sleeping, having a life, not babysitting a terrified witness. Adrian, he'd turned to face me, his expression serious. This isn't babysitting, this is caring about someone who's going through something traumatic, and honestly, sitting here with you feels more real than anything else in my life right now. In the blue-gray light before dawn, with exhaustion making us both raw and honest, I'd leaned against his shoulder. He'd wrapped an arm around me and we'd stayed like that until the sun came up. It wasn't romantic exactly. It was something deeper, trust, comfort, the beginning of intimacy that had nothing to do with physical attraction and everything to do with two people choosing to be vulnerable with each other. The break in the case came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was at work, trying to focus on a logo redesign for a sustainable clothing brand, when my phone buzzed with a call from Ryan. We found him, he said without preamble. Marcus Webb, we're bringing him in now. Relief flooded through me so intensely I had to sit down. Thank God. There's more, Ryan's voice was tight. We searched his apartment. Adrian, we found a box full of things related to you. My stomach dropped. What kind of things? Photos, mostly, of you outside your building at coffee shops, walking to work, some receipts from places you'd been, like he'd followed you and kept them, and, he paused, a notebook with detailed schedules of your movements. I felt sick. He was planning something. We think so. We're interviewing him now, trying to get him to talk, but I wanted you to know you were right to trust your instincts, and you're safe now. He's in custody, and with what we found, he won't be getting bail. Why though? My voice cracked. Why was he obsessed with me? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out, I promise. I left work early, unable to concentrate. The city felt different somehow, still the same rain-slicked streets and coffee shops and hills, but less menacing, like a weight had been lifted that I hadn't fully realized I'd been carrying. Ryan texted me 3 hours later. Can you come to the station? There's something you need to hear. The interview room was smaller than I'd expected, with a two-way mirror and that same fluorescent lighting that seemed mandatory in law enforcement facilities. Ryan was there, along with Detective Sarah Chen, an older woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Mr. Torres," she said, gesturing to a chair, "thank you for coming in. I know this is difficult, but we need to walk you through what we learned from Mr. Webb." I sat, my heart racing. Okay. Ryan took the lead, his voice professional but with an undercurrent of anger I'd never heard before. "Marcus Webb was hired to follow you. He's been keeping tabs on your movements for the past 6 weeks, documenting everything and reporting back to his employer." "Hired?" I echoed. "By who?" Detective Chen slid a folder across the table. Inside was a single photograph, a face I knew intimately, had loved desperately, had tried so hard to forget. Daniel. My ex-boyfriend, the man who'd texted me 8 months ago to end our 3-year relationship with cold, clinical efficiency. "No," I whispered, "that's not. Why would he?" "According to Webb," Ryan continued, his jaw tight, "Daniel Garrison paid him to monitor your activities, learn your routines, gather information. Webb claims he was supposed to be gathering intel for a potential lawsuit or harassment claim, though Daniel never specified what kind." "That's insane. I haven't contacted Daniel in months. I have no reason to sue him or harass him or—" I couldn't finish the sentence, my mind reeling. "We believe Webb escalated on his own," Detective Chen said. "The robbery at Chen's corner store wasn't random. He was waiting for an opportunity to either get you alone or create a situation where you'd be vulnerable. When Mr. Chen resisted, things went wrong." "But Daniel hired him," I said numbly. "Daniel put this in motion." Ryan's hand found mine under the table, a brief, grounding touch. "We've issued a warrant for Daniel Garrison's arrest as well. Conspiracy to stalk, among other charges. He's claiming it was just checking up on an ex and that he never authorized anything violent, but the paper trail suggests otherwise." I felt like I was drowning. The man I'd loved, who I'd given years of my life to, who I'd defended and made excuses for, he'd done this. Had orchestrated this nightmare out of what? Possessiveness? Control? Some twisted inability to let go. "Adrian," Ryan said softly, "look at me." I did, and the concern in his eyes was almost too much to bear. "This isn't your fault," he said. "None of this. You didn't cause this, and you couldn't have prevented it. Daniel Garrison is responsible for his own choices, and what he did was reprehensible and illegal." "I loved him," I whispered. "I actually loved him." "I know." His thumb brushed against my knuckles, hidden from Detective Chen's view. "And that makes what he did even worse. But you're safe now. They're both in custody and you can start moving forward." Detective Chen cleared her throat. "We'll need you to file a restraining order against Mr. Garrison, and there will likely be a trial, which means testifying, but Officer Mitchell is right. You're safe now. The threat is contained." I nodded mechanically, not trusting myself to speak. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of procedural explanations and legal terminology. When it was finally over, Ryan walked me out to the precinct parking lot. "Do you want me to drive you home?" he asked. "You shouldn't be alone right now." "I don't want to be alone," I agreed, "but I also don't want to fall apart in my apartment. Can we just drive anywhere?" He studied my face for a moment, then nodded. "Get in." Ryan drove us north out of the city and along the winding coastal highway. Neither of us spoke much. He seemed to understand that I needed silence, needed time to process the revelation that had upended my understanding of the past months. Eventually, he pulled off onto a narrow road that led to a small, rocky beach. Above us, perched on a cliff, stood an old lighthouse not operational anymore but maintained as a historical site. "Discovery Park," Ryan said, killing the engine. "I come here when I need to think, when everything feels too heavy." We got out of the car and he led me down a path to the beach. The late afternoon sun was trying to break through the clouds, casting everything in that peculiar golden gray light that Seattle did so well. The sound of waves against rocks was rhythmic, soothing. I sat down on a large piece of driftwood, and Ryan settled beside me, close but not touching. "I'm sorry," he said after a while. "I know those words don't mean much, but I'm sorry you had to find out like that you had to learn someone you cared about could be capable of something so cruel." "I thought I was over him," I said, my voice hoarse. "I thought I'd moved on, healed, whatever you want to call it, but finding out he'd been having me stalked. That he cared enough to hurt me but not enough to just leave me alone, I don't know how to process that." "You don't have to process it all at once." He told me he needed to live a normal life, like I was some aberration, some mistake he needed to correct. A bitter laugh escaped me. "And then he hired someone to follow me. What the hell does that say about either of us?" "It says he's a deeply damaged person who couldn't handle losing control over you," Ryan said firmly. "And it says you had the strength to walk away from someone who didn't deserve you, even when it hurt." Tears finally came, hot and angry and relieving. Ryan pulled me against his chest, his arms wrapping around me as I sobbed for the relationship I'd mourned, for the violation of being watched, for the trust that had been shattered. "I've got you," he murmured into my hair. "I've got you, Adrian, you're safe." When the tears finally subsided, I pulled back enough to look at him. His Henley was soaked, his expression heartbreakingly gentle. "Sorry," I managed, "I just ruined your shirt." "I have others," he brushed a tear from my cheek with his thumb. "Better." "Not really, but getting there." We sat in silence for a while, watching the waves. Gradually, I became aware of other things: the warmth of Ryan's body next to mine, the way his arm remained around my shoulders, the solid, reliable presence of him. "Ryan," I said quietly. "Yes." "Thank you for all of this, for protecting me, for being patient, for seeing me, really seeing me." He turned to look at me, and the intensity in his gaze made my breath catch. "That's the easy part," he said. "You're worth seeing." And then, with the lighthouse watching over us and the Pacific Ocean stretching endlessly before us, he leaned in and kissed me. It was gentle at first, tentative, questioning, giving me every opportunity to pull away. But I didn't want to pull away. I wanted this, wanted him, wanted to feel something other than fear and betrayal. I kissed him back, my hands finding the back of his neck, losing myself in the warmth and safety and promise of it. He tasted like coffee and something distinctly him, and when he deepened the kiss, I felt something shift inside me, a door opening, light flooding in where there had only been shadow. When we finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ryan rested his forehead against mine. "I know the timing is terrible," he said. "I know you're dealing with so much right now, and I don't want to be another complication." "You're not a complication," I interrupted. You're the thing that's kept me grounded through all of this, the person who made me feel like maybe I could trust again." "Adrian." "I like you," I said simply. "A lot, and I know it's fast and probably inadvisable and definitely breaking several rules, but I don't care. I've spent too long being careful, being patient, waiting for the right time. Maybe this is the right time, maybe we make it the right time." A smile broke across Ryan's face, unguarded, joyful, real. "I like you too, a lot, more than I probably should given the circumstances. So what do we do? How about we start with this?" He stood, offering me his hand. "I take you home, make sure you eat something because I'm guessing you haven't all day. We watch something mindless on TV, and I stay until you fall asleep because I know you won't if you're alone, and tomorrow we figure out the rest." I took his hand, letting him pull me up. "That sounds perfect." As we walked back to the car, his hand stayed in mine, warm, cert, a promise of something beginning just as something else was finally, truly ending. The weeks that followed Daniel's arrest were a study in contradictions. Relief warred with residual fear. Anger coexisted with the fragile beginnings of hope. I found myself jumping at shadows less often but still checking over my shoulder more than I like to admit. Ryan was there through all of it, not hovering, not smothering, but present in ways that mattered. He'd text good morning and good night. He'd show up at my door with takeout when he knew I'd been too stressed to cook. He'd sit with me while I worked through the trauma in therapy sessions I finally admitted I needed. It's okay to not be okay, my therapist, Dr. Reeves, told me during our third session. What you experienced was a violation of your autonomy and safety. Healing isn't linear. She was right. Some days I felt strong, capable, ready to move forward. Other days I wanted to hide in my apartment and never interact with the world again. But slowly, gradually, I began to reclaim my life. I started running again, early morning routes through Volunteer Park, with Ryan often joining me on his days off. We'd push each other up the hills, laugh at how out of shape we'd both gotten, and reward ourselves with pastries from the neighborhood bakery. I reconnected with friends I'd isolated myself from during the worst of the stalking. Marcus, my college roommate who now managed a gallery in Pioneer Square. Tasha, my former coworker who hosted legendary game nights. They welcomed me back without judgment, filling my calendar with distractions and laughter. And I spent time with Ryan, getting to know him outside the context of crisis and protection. "Tell me something nobody knows about you," I said one evening. We were in my apartment, sprawled on my couch with Thai food containers scattered on the coffee table. Rain pattered against the windows, Seattle's eternal soundtrack. Ryan had changed out of his uniform into jeans and a soft gray sweater that made his eyes look like storm clouds. He considered the question, a small smile playing at his lips. "Okay, I have a terrible singing voice, but I sing in the car anyway, loudly, to Broadway musicals." I laughed, delighted. "You're kidding." "Dead serious? My brother won't ride with me anymore because I did the entire Hamilton soundtrack on a road trip to Portland and he said it was auditory assault." "I need to witness this." "Absolutely not, that's private shame, thank you very much." He nudged my leg with his foot. "Your turn, tell me something nobody knows." I thought for a moment. I wanted to be a comic book artist when I was a kid. I filled entire notebooks with stories about superheroes, mostly queer ones, though I didn't have the language for that yet, just heroes who were different, who didn't fit the mold. "Do you still draw them?" "Sometimes when I'm stressed or can't sleep, it's therapeutic." Ryan's expression softened. "Can I see them sometime?" "They're not very good." "I don't care about good, I care about seeing something you create." The sincerity in his voice made my chest ache in the best way. "Okay, yeah, I'd like that." We fell into silence, comfortable and warm. Ryan's hand found mine, his fingers threading through mine with easy familiarity. In the 3 weeks since the kiss at the lighthouse, we'd been taking things slow, learning each other's rhythms, building a foundation that wasn't just based on crisis and adrenaline. It was nice, it was real. "Can I ask you something?" Ryan said eventually, "about Daniel." I tensed slightly but nodded. "Sure." How do you move past something like that, someone you loved betraying you so completely?" "Honestly, I don't know if you fully move past it," I admitted. "But I'm learning to move forward with it, to understand that what he did says everything about him and nothing about my worth, that being vulnerable and loving someone wasn't a mistake even if he turned out to be the wrong person." "That's incredibly mature." "Or incredibly stubborn. I refuse to let him ruin my capacity for trust." I squeezed Ryan's hand. "And you make it easier, the way you're patient with me, the way you don't push, it helps." "You make it easy to be patient." He shifted closer, his free hand coming up to cup my face. "You're extraordinary, Adrian Tors, I hope you know that." "I'm starting to," I whispered. He kissed me then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Unlike the desperate, emotional kiss at the lighthouse, this was leisurely, exploratory, like we had all the time in the world to learn the shape of each other's mouths, the way we fit together. When we finally pulled apart, I felt breathless and giddy and more alive than I had in months. "Stay tonight?" I asked. "Not for I mean just to stay, I sleep better when you're here." Ryan's smile was tender. "I'd love to." We cleaned up the dinner mess together, moving around my small kitchen with surprising synchronicity. Ryan washed dishes while I dried and we talked about nothing and everything, his shift that day, a difficult client at my work, whether pineapple belonged on pizza, we agreed to disagree. It felt domestic, normal, like we'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. Later, lying in my bed with Ryan's arm around me and his breath warm against the back of my neck, I felt something click into place. Not completion, I was learning that healing wasn't about becoming whole again but about accepting the cracks and growing stronger around them. But peace, safety, the knowledge that I wasn't alone anymore. Ryan, I murmured into the darkness. MMM. I'm glad you locked that door. I felt him smile against my shoulder. Me too. Trial began in early December when Seattle was dressed in early winter's gray and the city lights reflected off rain-slicked streets like scattered stars. Daniel and Marcus Webb were being tried separately, but I had to testify in both cases. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Janet Reese, had prepared me extensively, but nothing could fully ready me for seeing Daniel again. He looked different, thinner, older, with new lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. When our eyes met across the courtroom, I felt nothing. No anger, no residual love, just a distant sadness for what had been and what he'd become. Ryan sat in the gallery in civilian clothes since he was also a witness. His presence was a lifeline, grounding me as I took the stand and swore to tell the truth. The defense attorney tried to paint me as vindictive, as someone who couldn't accept the end of a relationship and had somehow provoked Daniel's actions. It was absurd, insulting, but I kept my composure, answering each question with calm precision. Mr. Torres, the prosecutor said during redirect, did you ever contact Mr. Garrison after your relationship ended? No, I respected his decision and moved on with my life. Did you threaten him, harass him, or give him any reason to fear for his safety? Absolutely not. Then why do you think he hired someone to follow you? I looked directly at Daniel, because he couldn't handle not having control over me anymore, because ending our relationship meant I was choosing myself, and that terrified him more than being honest about who he was. The courtroom was silent. Daniel looked away. Both verdicts came back guilty. Marcus Webb, attempted robbery, assault, stalking, 7 to 10 years. Daniel Garrison, conspiracy to commit stalking, criminal harassment, 3 years with the possibility of parole after 18 months. It should have felt like victory. In many ways it did. Justice had been served, accountability enforced. But I also felt hollowed out, exhausted by the process of reliving trauma in a public forum. Ryan was waiting outside the courthouse when I emerged, and I walked straight into his arms. It's over, he said into my hair. It's really over. Yeah, I managed. It is. We went to the lighthouse that evening, our place now, the spot where everything had shifted. The winter sun was setting early, painting the sky in shades of rose gold and deep purple. I never asked, Ryan said as we sat on our driftwood log, what you want to do next, now that you don't have court dates and security concerns hanging over you. I considered the question. I think I want to live, actually live, not just survive. I want to finish that comic series I started. I want to take a trip somewhere I've never been. I want to say yes to things that scare me in good ways instead of bad ones. That sounds perfect. And, I added, turning to face him, I want to see where this goes. With you, no more hesitation or waiting for the right time. This is the right time. Ryan's expression softened. I want that too, more than I can properly articulate. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small, wrapped package. I actually got you something, early Christmas present. You didn't have to. Just open it. I unwrapped the paper carefully, revealing a small leather journal. Inside, the first page had an inscription in Ryan's neat handwriting. For all the stories you're going to tell, the ones you've lived through and the ones still waiting to be written, I can't wait to be part of them. Tears pricked at my eyes. Ryan, this is too much, not enough, I wasn't sure. I kissed him, cutting off his anxious rambling. It's perfect, you're perfect. Well, not perfect, but perfect for me. He laughed, the sound warm and relieved. I can live with that. As darkness settled over the coastline and the lighthouse beam began its rotating sweep, I leaned against Ryan's shoulder and opened the journal. The blank pages felt full of possibility, space for healing, for growth, for new chapters. What are you going to write first? Ryan asked. I smiled, pulling out a pen. At the top of the first page I wrote, Chapter 1, The Night Everything Changed. Our story, I said. I'm going to write our story. Spring arrived in Seattle with tentative sunshine and cherry blossoms that turned Capitol Hill into something magical. My apartment, our apartment now, since Ryan had officially moved in 2 months ago, was filled with light and the smell of coffee and the comfortable chaos of two lives merging. I'd finished the first issue of my comic series, Fractured Light, the story of a superhero who discovers his greatest power isn't strength but the courage to be vulnerable. A small indie publisher had picked it up, and I was working on issue 2 between freelance design projects. Ryan had been promoted to detective, a recognition of his skills and dedication that came with more responsibility but also more flexibility. He still worked demanding hours, but we'd found our rhythm: late dinners, lazy Sunday mornings, spontaneous adventures when we both had time off. Life wasn't perfect. I still had moments of anxiety, still sometimes woke from nightmares about locked doors and shadowy figures, but I was healing. We were building something real and lasting, brick by careful brick. Adrian, Ryan called from the kitchen, your sister's calling. I grabbed my phone, Maya's face filling the screen with her characteristic exuberance. Big brother, guess what? You're engaged, I teased. She'd been dating Jasmine for 8 months and was clearly head over heels. Not yet, but ask me again in 6 months, she grinned. No, better news, I'm coming to Seattle next month for Pride, and I'm bringing Jasmine so she can finally meet your Detective Charming. Ryan, who'd appeared over my shoulder, waved at the screen. I promise to be on my best behavior. You better be, Maya said sternly. I need to make sure you're worthy of my brother. Nobody's worthy of Adrian, Ryan replied seriously, but I'm doing my best. Maya's expression softened. Good answer, I like you already. After we hung up, I turned to Ryan. Are you nervous about meeting her? Terrified, he admitted. Siblings can make or break relationships. She's going to love you, I assured him. She already does based on how happy I've been. Are you happy? I considered the question, really considered it. 6 months ago, I'd been broken, afraid, unable to imagine a future that wasn't defined by trauma. Now, I was creating art that mattered to me, living with someone who saw all of me and chose to stay, building a community of people who celebrated rather than tolerated my identity. Yeah, I said softly, I really am. Ryan pulled me close, his arms wrapping around me in that familiar, grounding embrace. Good, because you deserve every bit of happiness in the world. So do you. Then I guess we're lucky we found each other. Seattle Pride Parade was in full swing, and our group had claimed a spot near the Seattle Center with a perfect view of the procession. Maya and Jasmine were there, along with my friends from the Capitol Hill Queer Book Club and several of Ryan's colleagues from the precinct, including his partner, Officer James Rodriguez, who'd become a good friend over the past year. Ryan and I wore matching Love is Love shirts that Maya had insisted on buying us, and I'd never felt more visible, more proud, more completely myself. Next year we should march, Ryan said, his hand finding mine in the crowd. Yes. Yeah, I want everyone to see how proud I am to be with you. I leaned up and kissed him, ignoring the catcalls and cheers from our friends. When we pulled apart, both grinning like idiots, Maya was recording on her phone. That's going in the wedding video, she announced. We're not engaged, I protested, but Ryan just squeezed my hand and smiled mysteriously. 2 hours later, after the parade had ended and our group had migrated to a rooftop bar overlooking the city, Ryan pulled me aside. I need to tell you something, he said, and the nervous energy radiating off him made my pulse quicken. Okay. I know we've only been together officially for a year, I know that's fast by most standards, but Adrian, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. He took a breath. You make me want to be better, braver, more honest. You've taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness, that loving openly is the most radical thing we can do. Ryan, what are you? He dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket, and my heart stopped. Adrian Torres, will you marry me? The rooftop went silent, then erupted in cheers as I pulled him to his feet, tears streaming down my face. Yes, I said, laughing and crying simultaneously. Yes, absolutely yes. He slid the ring onto my finger, a simple silver band with an engraved inscription on the inside, "You are worth seeing." We kissed as the sun set over Seattle, our city, our home, the place where a locked door had led not to danger but to the greatest love of my life. Later, as we celebrated with friends and family, Maya pulled me aside. "You know what the best part is," she said, her own eyes suspiciously bright. "What?" "You're happy, genuinely, completely happy, and you deserve that, big brother, you always have." I looked across the rooftop to where Ryan was laughing with James, his face lit up with joy, and felt a completeness I'd never thought possible. "Yes," I agreed, "I really do."